Governor Bruce Rauner, a year.
Today's a one-year anniversary.
Our 1 year anniversary. If you could sum up your first year as governor of Illinois in one word, what would it be?
Some great progress and some frustrating failures as well.
A lot more than one word, and it's a complicated state. Let's talk about what's going on now. Do you have a time frame in your mind of getting this budget impasse solved?
You know what? All I can say is I want it done now. We've been pushing hard. We're just going to stay persistent, stay strong. What we can't do is what the Speaker currently has recommended, and that's just put in a massive income tax hike. He said it in December. He says, let's just go back to at least, let's start with 5% on the income tax. That would be a mistake. We did that in 2011, and it was a failure. While that income tax hike was in place, our credit rating got downgraded 5 times. The unfunded pension liability went up $28 billion. We cut school funding. More people left the state at a higher rate. Our economic growth rate got cut to less than half the national average, and the unpaid bill backlog, which was in theory that was what it was for, it barely made a dent. We paid down less than 30% of the unpaid bills. It was a disaster on every level. And to somehow say, let's just go back and do the income tax to solve the problem, no way.
Is there a mood in the General Assembly to pass such a tax?
Well, if there was, they would do it. The Democrats have a supermajority. They could easily pass. They've passed some things over my objections already. If they thought that was the right answer, they would do it. They know that's not the right answer. They would love me to do it because it's unpopular and it would make their lives easier. They wouldn't want me to do it, and I've said, look, I will negotiate with you on some revenue, some tax reform, because we could use some tax reform. That said, without structural reform to grow the economy, grow jobs, get more value for taxpayers, I will never look a resident of Illinois in the eye and say, I'm going to raise your taxes without reforms. I'm not going to do that.
Is that the fundamental difference between the two parties, or at least the philosophies, is that you can't keep spending new dollars without cutting and finding a way to I mean, it's almost like we'll raise taxes, but we'll take the raising of the taxes, but we'll spend it on new dollars, and we're not solving any of the problems that are already there.
No, that's exactly right. In Illinois, we've had this failure in our government for years. This is not a recent problem.
Describe being a business person and coming from a business background and not being a career politician, because I think more people can relate to you as a businessman than they can as a politician. How different is it trying to figure out how to solve problems in government than it is versus solving problems in a business?
Well, what's fascinating is figuring out the right answer isn't that hard in business or in government. Thoughtful people get together and figure, here's the answer. It's not deciding what the problem is. It's convincing others to go along. It's developing consensus. Democracy is designed to move slowly, and change in democracy comes through a long, slow process. Right now, because the special interests, and this is the difference between the big difference between government and the private sector, special interests who make their money from the process, from the government itself. That's not true in business. You got customers, and you got employees, and you got executive leaders. Here, folks are making money from inside the bureaucracy, and they have a power to force the bureaucracy to give them more. Yeah. That's not true in business, and that's what we got to change.
In our world, we have to produce results, whether it's ratings, whether it's revenue, to stay in business. The tax dollars keep rolling in no matter what the job performance is. How do you change that in the system? Because there's no incentive to do it right. Those tax dollars come in no matter what.
That's exactly right. That's the big problem. Government really doesn't feel the need to be competitive because the changes, we're not competitive in Illinois, and what we're seeing is just the long, slow out-migration of jobs and people. That's the sign we're not competitive. People go where the opportunities are. Businesses have to respond. If they're not competitive, they're gone in a few years. Government in Illinois is gradually going away, but it's going to take 50 years before it's really in a dramatically different place.
Why do Republicans in general have a hard time explaining that they're compassionate about people who are being hurt by cuts in services? They understand that there's real people at the other end of this argument, but if you don't fix it in the long haul, you're not doing anything to better those folks' lives. You just get painted as the billionaire or the guy who doesn't care. How do you do a better job messaging that you understand what happens on the other end of this?
Yeah, well, and you're right, that's a big challenge, because if I talk about balanced budgets and true living within our means, people immediately say, well, but we need to put money here and here and here. And my response is, I agree with you. But we can't be compassionate if we're not competitive. We're gradually going to spend our way into oblivion. We need to have a balance. If we're competitive, we'll have the money to be compassionate. I'm a big believer in a social services safety net to support the most vulnerable. We should have the best in America. We can't afford that if we're not growing our economy, growing jobs, and we'll have more people in the safety net if we're not growing. We've got to grow.
Okay, are you overall optimistic or pessimistic about the future of the state of Illinois?
Oh, I'm very optimistic. I'm a big believer. That's the reason I ran for office. I love Illinois. This is home. I'm so proud of Illinois, and it's just, the people here are fantastic. I love it. That's the reason I'm working, because the only thing holding us back is the conflicts of interest in the government not working. We can change this. It's not easy, but we can change it. The political class has been running the Illinois government for its own benefit for decades. We get power back to the people, and we will thrive.
How many times have you sat down in a room and met with the leadership?
Gosh, I've met quite a few times, probably a dozen times, with all four leaders simultaneously. Those are very rarely very productive. The productive meetings, I've had dozens and dozens of meetings with individual leaders one-on-one, or in groups of two with me. And all the leaders, the President Culleton's been very productive, and obviously Leader Durkin and Radonio. Speaker Madigan and I have a cordial relationship. We speak regularly and have good communication. He's just made it pretty clear he doesn't want to change anything. He likes the status quo. He's obviously, he and his folks inside the government, the lobbyists and everybody that he controls, are doing very well. He doesn't want to change that, doesn't want to rock the boat. He's doing quite well. But I've told him I will never, ever put a tax hike on the people of Illinois unless I can look them in the eye and say they're getting value, and that means, Speaker, we've got to change.
All right, final question. Much is made about your family recently. You know, I think most people in Illinois can relate to you wanting to make sure your kids are safe and understand security issues.
Right.
Has that been sort of the hardest thing getting used to, you know, coming into this very public life? Is just common sense seems to go out the window, and the expectation levels of you as a person have just changed. How do you deal with that as a family? I mean, that must be a very tough transition.
Yeah, it's hard. We've got 6 kids. You know, I love them dearly, and they're not public citizens. They have their own private lives. So I haven't had much time with them at all the last 3 years. We did take a family trip, and I didn't want it on the internet what country we were going to. I just didn't want it out there. So we got some little criticism for that. You know what? The criticism doesn't mean anything to me. We do want it to be transparent. We've had some fight about my public schedule, making it public who I'm meeting with or publishing my calendar. That's different than my kids. My kids are private. My calendar I'm fine making public. The one thing I've said is I've got a job to do. I've got to recruit companies to come here, and I've got to negotiate with leaders from the other side who may not want it known that they're talking to me, or companies that don't want to tell their board yet they're negotiating to move to Illinois. I can't have that in the public. So we've got to find some compromise that works.
All right, are you having any fun?
You know what? I find it very satisfying and very energizing to work for the people of Illinois. I love the work. It's hard, it's stressful. My New Year's resolution is to gain 10 pounds. You know, I've been running around so hard, I've lost a little weight, but I feel good, and we're doing well.
All right, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
Governor Bruce Rauner.
Thanks.